Hey everyone, this is Charles Laughlin, and welcome to Above the Cloud. This is the first episode of our new podcast all about the small business software industry, brought to you by the Tech Adoption Index. Today's inaugural episode is sponsored by Mono Solutions, Boostability, NetLinks, and the Tech Adoption Summit. So let's get going. Cue the royalty-free music. Hey everyone, this is Charlie. So in today's episode of Above the Cloud, we have two segments. First, Neil Polachek and I, my colleague with the Tech Adoption Index, are going to talk about Mary Meeker's Internet Trends Report and unpack some of the elements within that report that sort of have relevance to the SMB cloud space and the SaaS industry and so on. Talk about things like messaging apps and the full stack and some other things that are sort of relevant to the SMB customer experience and other issues around small business software that we talk about all the time. And so that's sort of the first part of the conversation between Neil and I. And then we're going to move into a discussion with Ariel Diaz, who's the founder and CEO of blissfully.com, which is a company that basically will go into your company and figure out all of your SaaS software products that are floating around the company and sort of rationalize them and hopefully save you money on, unused subscriptions and redundant subscriptions and things like that. So he's an interesting business that's sort of there to help clean up SaaS confusion. That's a real thing out there. But the real reason we're talking is that they've issued a report looking at a survey they've done on small business use of SaaS products. And so he's going to unpack some of the findings from that report, which is coming out this week. So that's basically the podcast this week. And again, I want to thank our sponsors, Mono Solutions, Boostability, NetLinks, and the Tech Adoption Summit. You'll hear a bit from each of them during the course of the podcast today. And we hope you enjoy the show. Thanks. Of Above the Cloud is brought to you by Mono Solutions. Mono Solutions provides a SaaS-based platform for professional and data-driven SMB website solutions at scale. Mono enables digital service providers to deliver high-quality, do-it-for-me websites efficiently and affordably in order to empower small businesses to succeed across the digital landscape. Hey Neil, how's it going?
Good morning here from Los Angeles, California. Increasingly my second home, it seems like these days.
Yeah. So at any rate, I'm in Brooklyn. I'm at the Street Fight Summit, which was same time last year. We actually unveiled the Tech Adoption Index here. So we're back and we're going to be talking to a lot of folks about what's going on in the SMB SaaS world. So welcome to the first edition of Above the Cloud, our new podcast. We've been recording sort of tech adoption related pods on the LSA On Target podcast, where we decided it made sense to have one of our own. So welcome. And so what we wanted to do today is talk about some things going on in the business we cover, which is the small business software world, and sort of what's going on there. And you recently, Mary Meeker, every year she does this Internet Trends Report. She recently came out with her new one. You've poured through it a little bit. What's relevant to our world in there?
It's 294 slides. She doesn't leave anything on the ground, I don't think.
Very little.
There were a couple sections that I thought were pretty interesting, and I'll point people to the specific slide numbers. She has a section in there about payments. That's on slide 18 in her deck. And what's interesting there is that what it says is that payments are increasingly digital. I think the number is 60% of the last 10 payments that people made were done digitally. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty telling. And what that suggests to me in the space we're talking about is that merchants are going to have to start to figure out how to accept payments more and more.
Right.
Because from the consumer side, that's clearly what the consumer's driving toward. And I even find myself more and more, hitting the Apple Pay button on my phone, pulling out my credit card less frequently.
Right.
and using some form of electronic payment much more frequently. So that's an interesting slide in there.
Yeah, and just another kind of point about small business always having to play catch up to what consumers want to do.
Always going to be that case.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've seen that for years. We saw it, in the early days of websites.
Yep.
Consumers were wanting to go to websites, and small businesses were well behind on that.
Right.
The second area, and I think it ties in with payments, is messaging. Mm-hmm. That's slide 22 in her deck. And it's just about the incredible growth in messaging. And I think one of the trends that SMBs, merchants need to be paying attention to is their customers and their emerging customers and their prospects want to engage with them, not as often through a phone call or through email, but increasingly through messaging. Mm-hmm. And the data just confirms that the trend lines of minutes of use of messaging are just skyrocketing. So it's another thing that our downstream audience needs to be understanding, because it's really how the consumer market wants to engage with folks.
Right.
Then there's a section beginning on slide 56 around what sort of begins to look like a full stack discussion. Mm-hmm. And it's a number of pieces of the puzzle. I think it's slides 51 through 56, where the headers are essentially as follows. Offline merchants set up a payment system. That might be Square, that might be some of the other platforms, PayPal, what have you. And she even calls out on that they do payroll, they do loans, they do invoices, they do analytics.
Right.
And then, you can build an online store. Companies like Shopify help with that. Then you can integrate online payment systems, back to that payment theme. Mm-hmm. And then you can integrate fraud protection, because increasingly merchants are going to have to deal with the same kind of fraud protection things that large brands and large e-commerce companies deal with. Mm-hmm. And then there's a way to integrate the purchase financing even. If you can't afford the new, couch you want to buy, there's a pre-approved financing thing. I was at an event last month in May, where there are companies out there that will help HVAC guys get financing so that the homeowner can install a new air conditioning and get financing as well at the same time. Right.
Well, so I think this kind of leads to this conversation about there's not one stack. There's probably going to be multiple stacks forming based on what door they're entering through. So there's
I agree with that.
Connectivity and security, and that may be one stack, and finance is another stack, and marketing is another stack, and biz ops is another stack, and there's going to be overlap among those stacks. And that's sort of the core theme that we've been pushing on since we started this thing.
Well, it's like there's going to be short stacks and full stacks,
right?
And there's going to be ones that are appropriate for your vertical type of business, that are different from a stack that might be appropriate for a different kind of service business.
It just made me really hungry for pancakes.
Yeah. Well, it's 9:00 my time. It's noon.
There's never a bad time for pancakes.
That's right. And then finally, there's another slide in there around subscription stuff, and just how subscription models are accelerating in adoption among small business, among consumers, and that's going to translate into small business. Interestingly, our friend Celine from BIA, I guess they now call it BIA. They've dropped the Kelsey brand.
No more Kelsey.
She sent us an article the other day about how Amazon is trying to unencumber the ability for small businesses to use platforms like Tableau, these data visualization platforms. But what they're trying to do is make it available to small businesses by charging on a per session basis, as opposed to a subscription basis. So they're going from from to the next place that things might go, which is really just a per session kind of model. Now, of course, they can afford to, because they can afford to do whatever they want there.
Right.
But I think that's a really interesting peek into where some of these subscription models might eventually go. I was speaking of that, I was with a company that helps HVAC guys,
Mm-hmm.
and they charge on a per estimate written model.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a SaaS model. It's really a usage sensitive model, so that I think it's 99 cents per invoice or per estimate generated. And if a guy has 3,000 invoice estimates in a month, they pay the company $3,000.
Mm-hmm.
In the off season, when there's no HVAC work, they're not paying some fixed even subscription fee. If they do 10 estimates that month, they pay $10.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're going to see, even in this space, the evolution of some of these business models.
All right, Neil. Well, we'll end it there. Good catching up, and we'll catch up on the next one. So
yeah, looking forward to it, Charles.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. All right, then. Let's pay some bills and then move on to our conversation with Ariel Diaz from blissfully.com. This edition of Above the Cloud is brought to you by Boostability. Boostability is an online marketing service provider that has devoted its mission to helping small businesses compete online. Over its 9-year history, the company has become one of the largest, most highly rated, affordable digital marketing services providers in the world. They provide SEO, social media, and website services designed and priced with SMBs in mind. Boostability primarily works with partners that offer their white-labeled services to their small business clients. For more information, visit Boostability, BOOSTABILITY.com. Ariel, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining us. The reason we're talking today is I was at SaaS Connect a couple weeks back, and you gave a really interesting talk about this report you've done where you've researched basically the use of SaaS products in the business community. I mean, it wasn't exclusively about small business, but a lot of it, correct, but a lot of it was drilled down into how small businesses are using SaaS tools. So we're going to talk about that, but before we do, I just give you a chance to introduce yourself a little bit and just tell us what is Blissfully, and more important, where does Blissfully fit into that small business SaaS ecosystem?
Yep, absolutely. So my name is Ariel Diaz, founder and CEO of Blissfully, and we help companies manage all of the SaaS that they're using internally, which includes identifying which SaaS apps are being used, how much people are spending on them, and which people across the organization are using them. And we can help companies create this really essentially real-time overview of all this SaaS usage, which is increasingly important as more and more business workflows move to SaaS. It's important to understand where your company data is going. It's important to understand how much you're spending and if you're spending money efficiently on the right apps. Mm-hmm. So we built this all over the last year or so. We're a venture-backed company. We've got well over 400 companies using Blissfully to manage all of their internal SaaS. And we started this based on our own personal pain point managing SaaS. We used to have a spreadsheet at my last company, and anytime you see a spreadsheet, it's an opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. That means something could be better, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So the pain point you experienced was what? That you noticed that everyone was sort of buying their own applications within the organization and they weren't connected, they were often redundant. Was it that sort of thing, or?
All of the above and more. We call it the SaaS chaos. Uh-huh. Who's using this? Did we get approval for that? Are we still using it? Did the employee that left 2 weeks ago, were they managing subscriptions that we don't even know about that now are wasted? Mm-hmm. Our security, where's the company data going? It was really all of these questions that, we had trouble answering.
So just quickly on that, can you illustrate in some way how a business before and after looks, after you've, pick I don't know if you can think of a specific example of a sort of a really messy case of SaaS chaos that you've solved, and what kind of dollars does a business save, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yep. So let me think through representative example, smaller, medium company, 50 to 100 people. In most cases, companies in that range are trying to manage SaaS with a spreadsheet that typically has a bunch of columns on who's the owner for that particular app, how much they're spending, what's the contract, when does it renew. And unfortunately, that spreadsheet is almost always out of date because, it's incomplete. It doesn't have all the apps. It may not even have the correct information on the apps that are listed on there. So when we work with companies, we'll typically try and engage them and understand that spreadsheet. And what we do is step one is automate and improve on that spreadsheet. And we have integrations with G Suite, with accounting systems, with single sign-on systems. So we can triangulate a lot of data and create a really rich picture and list of all the different SaaS apps. That's step one. Nearly every company that installs Blissfully, on initial installation, and pulling this initial report takes a couple of minutes, they'll see apps they didn't know they were using within minutes of installation. Nearly every single company that's installed us. So that's kind of step one. And then step two is identifying ways to save money. This could either be redundant apps that are owned by people no longer at the company, or just working with them to optimize existing vendors. A medium-sized company, we help them save over 10 grand, over $10,000 over the course of a year, just by helping be smarter about their different SaaS vendors. And that's one of the values is helping save money, but we also do a lot around just running the business and the operation and the integration beyond just the financial part.
So just last point on this, and then we'll get into the report, is this sort of solving the SaaS chaos your sort of way into the company, and then you're ultimately looking to have a deeper relationship with the organizations you're going into? So what's the end game then for Blissfully?
So we have our vision is to really be that trusted partner to manage SaaS for companies via software. We do have a freemium model, and actually our data shows that about 3/4 of the apps that companies use are in the free tiers. So we know freemium is a very significant adoption strategy for SaaS, and that's our model. So our free tier helps companies track all of the different SaaS apps they're using, how much you're spending and who's using them. And our premium tier helps automate and track a lot of the workflow around managing SaaS. This includes things like welcoming a new employee and making sure they have access to all of their apps as you onboard them. It includes employee offboarding, so tracking that you've removed access from all of the apps. It includes your vendor approval or management process, whether you have a more formal procurement or you just want to make sure that your vendors meet your security and compliance requirements. We can help track and manage all of that workflow as part of our premium tier. So our vision is get you in, let's get you some great value on what apps you're using, how you're using them. And then over time, we can help manage and automate a lot more of your SaaS management.
Okay. Oh, I lied a little bit. I do have one more question about how you, just quickly, what metrics drive your business?
Just generally.
What metrics do you look at and say we're doing well or we're really suffering?
Yep. So from
Blissfully standpoint, not from your customers. Yeah.
Got it. We are a venture-backed startup on just starting to ramp up growth. So obviously how we work with companies, how we get more companies on board is one. Another big one is how satisfied our companies are. Right. I think all businesses are very focused on making sure their customers are getting value out of the product. We always are looking for feedback, how we can help simplify their lives. So those are really two of the big ones, and they're very closely related. The happier our customers are, the more likely they're going to be to share Blissfully with their colleagues and other companies, which will also help drive growth.
Okay, all right, we'll leave that there. Let's talk about the report now. Well, just tell us a little. I'm assuming you're doing it for attention, which is fine. Everyone does those things for attention. But what was the insight, or what was the idea that led you to think this is something that is needed and that you're in a unique position to publish? And then just briefly tell us what the quick summary of it, and then we'll get into some specifics.
Sure. So we just being ourselves consumers of a lot of SaaS
Mm-hmm.
across our company. We use almost 100 different SaaS vendors to
Mm-hmm.
get, across our different business functions. And, there's always an interesting question of, which apps are coming up that I might not know about that I should know about, trying to stay on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
And, what are other people doing? And we knew these types of questions are very common among business owners and among business operators. So we wanted to use the data that we have across our kind of aggregate customer base and see how can we create unique and interesting and useful data around SaaS trends that can help businesses either make better decisions or satisfy some of the curiosity around what's happening across different business departments.
Okay. So let's, why don't we, if you could just, I recall just from your presentation, there was a few interesting things, but I don't want to sort of choose them at random out of order, but maybe you could talk about 3 or 4 things that came out of the report that you think either were surprising or really are really get to the heart of what's going on in the small business SaaS world.
Yep, absolutely. So if you look at just small businesses, which is a big chunk, but a subset of our customer base, they're paying for over 20 different SaaS products. So these are 20 different SaaS subscriptions for even small and medium companies.
Yeah.
And even more interestingly, and this data surprising was not too surprising, but I think the scale of it is that companies use 3 times more free apps than paid apps. And this is really incredible because, a lot of times these free apps are invisible to finance or the business ops team. They may not know, who's using which free apps. And it starts to really create a lot of interesting questions around why are they using it? Is it because they need a particular feature that their company isn't paying for? Or is it because they think there's a better version out there, like a video conferencing app that they prefer the free tier of a different vendor? So you start to get into these really interesting questions. And in aggregate, we can see some of those trends, which in turn are fun to share.
So what you're saying is a lot of the free app usage is sort of rogue usage within the company?
Yeah, that's right. It's, the old school term for this was shadow IT.
Okay.
And in the new world, SaaS kind of blurs the line of shadow IT. A lot of small, medium businesses don't even have IT teams or departments. So what does that even mean? So we want to shed light on all SaaS usage, whether folks want to call it shadow IT or really increasingly learn from it. What are people using? What do they like using? And is this something we should adopt more broadly for the company? Is also a really interesting question.
Okay, so it can help them just sort of understand their IT needs a little bit better in general.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. One thing that I took away from your talk was this notion of you had a lot of discussion about competition among apps and the degree of competition and how sort of crazy it is in some categories. And yeah, you also made the point that there's still room for expansion in some categories, and there's still certainly plenty of head space for adoption or upside, I should say. But one thing you talked about is this difficulty in differentiation. And this notion of branding as a differentiator instead of actual performance or quality or whatever. That struck me as kind of interesting in that is there such parity in the quality of these apps that really there is no other way to differentiate than through branding? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So this is, I've been in the tech space now for a little while. This is my third startup. And, I would say, about 5 years ago, plus or minus, you could really differentiate with a really well-designed app that had a really nice UX, that had a mobile app that was really highly functional. And over the last, couple of years, we've seen the quality of all apps increase dramatically as engineering tools get better and development gets easier, as a lot of the patterns of how to create a nice platform and a nice mobile app, those patterns have emerged. So people can really learn quickly about what the best apps are doing. So what you've seen is the difference between the product UX or the design or their mobile app functionality has dramatically come down. And inherently, as those differences, the opportunity to differentiate on product decreases, then what's left is branding. And Dave Cancel, for example, at Drift talks about this a lot, how, the consumer product goods companies where, really only were able to differentiate on brand. And
like
I think
bleach.
that's one, that's right. And, I think that's one extreme. And there are absolutely categories where people can differentiate on product. Our category, for example, of course, we're differentiated on product. We do have some unique features and integrations, but I think it's as the quality of all these different SaaS apps increases, the bar is raised for everybody, and therefore you have to be continually creative.
So then I guess that leads to the point of, is this a game for the best funded? I mean, big surprise if that's true, but is that a natural conclusion from brand being a differentiator, and that it's a question of resources?
Good question. I don't think so, because, I think brand really encapsulates not just how much mind share you're able to generate via paid or other channels, but also what's the emotional response and connection that you're able to have with your customers, with potential customers. And a lot of that can be built in more organic ways that might not cost a lot.
Not like there aren't examples of that all over the place, right?
Yeah. So, I think, for brand building, obviously financial leverage helps to give the resources, but I don't think it's strictly a requirement.
Okay. All right. So just quickly tell us about, I don't know if you want to summarize a few other things the report contains, but also talk about how people can get a copy of it and when it's going to be released. And is this something you're doing every year? I mean, is this a regular thing that people?
Yeah. So we do a refresh every quarter.
Okay.
And it's available on our website at blissfully.com, and you can view on our footer, it's /SaaS trends. Okay. So it's blissfully.com/SaaS trends.
Okay. We'll make sure to repeat that.
That's right.
At some point, and we'll put it in the blog post too.
Yep. So we do updates every quarter. We try and dig into various, different threads of the data every quarter.
Okay. So it's not just a refresh of the data. You take a different spin on it every time.
So we looked a little bit more closely at pre-app usage this particular quarter, which is what we presented, and we're refreshing that based on every quarter there's some interesting data to share.
Okay. All right. Let's change gears a little bit. Remind me, Blissfully is a couple of years old, right?
Yep.
Okay, and this is how many previous startups had you been involved in?
So two previous startups. And
were they in any way related, or is Blissfully a complete 360?
They were all technology companies. The first one was online video platform. The second one created online textbooks. First one was angel backed, second venture backed, and then this one is just squarely within the SaaS world and more internal focused. So one was consumer, one education, and one B2B.
Okay. Why B2B?
So I think, number one, I've lived through this this is my third time founder CEO. I've lived through a lot of the types of pains that you have running and managing businesses. So a lot of these pains were really organic to my own experience. And I was essentially, as we were building out the alpha and the beta of this product, I am the customer in addition to helping develop it. And I think that is really helpful when you're building out products, because you can put yourself in the customer's shoes much more effectively. So that was number one. And number two, I think in B2B SaaS, there's an opportunity to really work closely with customers, make sure you're solving very clear pain points for them. And they'll let you know if you're solving the pain points and if your product provides an ROI for them. And there's a lot of a very concrete, feedback loop between going to market and selling and marketing, plus what your customers want, what they're telling you, and what they're paying for, that I think is really nice to see in the B2B space. Okay.
And B2B space, SaaS, excuse me, is, how would you rate it as a space for market entry right now? Too frothy, too busy? Still plenty of opportunity? Are investors still excited about it? Just talk a little bit about, if you're advising somebody to start a business.
Yeah. So I think there's certainly a lot more noise than there was, even 3, 4, 5 years ago. That said, there's, for every very competitive market, there's still always interesting opportunities. Google is famously known as like they were like the 37th search engine.
Right. Exactly.
And
first one that was
came
really
in,
good, but
exactly. But at the time, it was hard to believe that was needed.
right.
You look at what Drift has been able to do, and Intercom's been around longer and had a really great product, and Drift has been able to come along and have some significant traction. So I think so it's a little bit of yes and yes. The market is absolutely noisier, busier, and frothier, but that doesn't mean there aren't opportunities to come in with a great product and a great story and narrative and create something great.
Okay. So what's next for Blissfully? I mean, what's on your roadmap that you can talk about?
Sure. So, I mentioned before our freemium model, where the free tier is getting the complete visibility of SaaS usage throughout the organization. And our premium tier is the workflows to help companies manage that, everything from employee onboarding, offboarding to vendor management. And we're continually working on rolling out additional workflows to help companies. Compliance, we've got a bunch of features that help companies prepare for compliance audits, SOC 2, GDPR, et cetera. So, that's a big priority for us. And then, we've got a lot more integrations to make sure we have a really great, great complete picture of SaaS usage. And then beyond that, we've got a very, very aggressive roadmap. Our customers are very clear on some of their wish lists, and we're working pretty hard to deliver on a lot of those as well.
How big's your team now?
We're 6 folks.
Wow, you're huge.
Yeah.
How big do you think you'll be at the end of the year?
Lean and mean. Probably 15 or 20.
Okay, so you're still lean and mean, yeah. Thanks for joining us. It's been a lot of fun, and we'll encourage everyone to read the report. It's got a lot of great information in there, and really appreciate you taking the time.
Sounds good.
All right, great. Take care.
All right, thank you.
This episode of Above the Cloud is sponsored by NetLinks. NetLinks has developed a powerful guided selling system called NX Power Pack that turns every sales consultant into a top performer. The system uses an adaptive presentation engine to guide the consultant through the process, responding to feedback from the buyer to design the right solution. Adaptive, guided systems like NX Power Pack are the future of sales. Go to netlinks.com for more info. That's net-linx.com. Thanks for listening, everyone. Just wanted to talk to you for a minute about the Tech Adoption Summit. It's coming up in November 7th in San Francisco. We're having it at a place called The Laundry, which is a mixed-use space in the Mission District. It's a cool space. It only holds about 100 people, so we're expecting the event to sell out. And right now, we're recruiting speakers and sponsors and folks with great ideas for sessions. We'll be posting an agenda really soon at techadoptionindex.com. And we just want everyone's participation. We want this to be a collaborative process of putting on the best show out there about the small business cloud. So if you have some ideas or you just want to chat about it or hear more about it, reach out to me at charles@thelsa.org. We really hope to see you in San Francisco.